Imagine paying thousands in HOA fees, and then being told you can't park in your own driveway by the very person who just kicked in your door. What would you do if your HOA president tried to steal your family's home with a smile and a clipboard? My name's Rex Holloway. I live well. Lived in a cedar-scented cabin my granddad built after the war. Tucked on the quiet edge of a Michigan lake the color of old glass. The place wasn't perfect. The floorboards creaked like a cranky uncle. The dock leaned a little left. And the fireplace coughed if you didn't beg it with dry kindling. But it was ours. You could rub your palm along the hand-hewn beams and still catch that faint mix of sawdust and Old Spice that clung to my grandfather's sweaters. After my divorce, I moved into the cabin to, breathe. Peace. Space. Instead, I met Karen. Karen was the HOA president. Self-elected queen of everything that wasn't hers. Mid-50s. Immaculate bob. Ironed khakis, sharp enough to cut paper. And a taste for authority that would make a parking meter blush. She patrolled the neighborhood in a spotless SUV with magnetic HOA official signs slapped on both doors. She carried a measuring tape like it was a scepter and used it like a weapon. Folks said she used to sell insurance until something went sideways. I don't know about that, opinions vary, but I know she loved rules the way some people love their dogs. The first time she came to my door. She did not knock, she announced. Courtesy notice. She chirped, handing me a stack as thick as the Sunday paper. You're in violation of several community standards. Several turned out to mean nearly 50. Everything, from my dock being allegedly too long to my fire pit being an unpermitted combustion structure. There were fines listed hundreds of dollars up front. More every day. Written in tidy blocks, like a receipt for a crime spree. I told her the cabin predated the HOA by decades. Karen smiled, with all the warmth of a car warranty robocall. Previous ownership is irrelevant. Mr. Holloway. All properties within jurisdiction must comply. You have 30 days. Then she added, soft enough to feel like a threat. Or, we place a lien. She mispronounced it. Leaned on the word like a thumb on a bruise. That night, I drove to the county building with a thermos of bad coffee and an equally bad temper. I spent hours under fizzing lights, flipping through dusty ledgers. Squinting at signatures. Somewhere after midnight, I found it. The HOA paperwork had been filed just after my grandfather passed. And a signature that was supposed to be his looked wrong. The loop of the H was too tidy. The tail on the Y too neat. I ain't a handwriting expert, but I know the swagger of my granddad's name. This looked like someone trying to copy a legend from memory. I went home, stared at the beams, and swore I wouldn't let anyone pluck our history out of the rafters. I installed cameras. I started a file. I called a lawyer who didn't flinch when I said the word fraud. The next week, Karen brought a surveyor at sunrise. Compliance inspection, she announced, marching across my yard like she'd just claimed it for a kingdom I never voted for. The surveyor did his best not to look me in the eye. They measured the dock. They photographed the fire pit. Karen crouched to peer through my windows in a way that felt sorry more than nosy. Creepy. My cameras caught everything. Time-stamped and clean. Later. Over a burger at Murphy's Diner. The surveyor found me and muttered that Karen had underpaid him and pushed him to, quote, find violations, even if he had to be creative. Help me get my money, he said. I'll talk. He seemed desperate. I took notes and kept breathing. Karen didn't slow down. She mailed new notices, more fines, more threats. She stopped by at weird hours. Once I spotted her squatting behind my azaleas at night with a flashlight, whispering into her phone like a kid playing spy. Another time, she walked up my dock, stared at the water, and said, "This structure is unsafe." The dock had carried my whole family 1,000 summer mornings. It sagged a little, sure, but it was sturdy, the way old things are sturdy with memory. Word spread. Folks who'd been quiet started telling their stories. Martha, a widow who had tended the same rosebed for almost half a lifetime, had been forced by Karen to rip it out because the height offended sightlines. Tom, an Afghanistan vet with forearms like tree trunks, admitted he'd never been more anxious than when Karen parked outside his place and waited. A young couple next street over had been fined for chalk drawings on their driveway graffiti. The notice said, "There's people who can take a harmless thing and turn it into paperwork." Karen was that. Concentrated. We took our stack to a property attorney named Stella Crawford out of Grand Rapids. Steel-eyed. Practical. And the kind of smile that says she's already seen the trick you're about to try. Michigan law isn't a free-for-all, she told me. If the HOA formation was defective, and I'm saying if you might not be covered at all, also, if there's a pattern of harassment, we can talk about a broader action. I didn't ask for promises. I asked for a path. Stella dug while I documented. I kept a log so detailed it bordered on obsessive. The dates, the comments, the doorbell camera snippets, emails where Karen said one thing on Tuesday and the opposite on Thursday, screenshots, recordings, every grain of nonsense she tossed my way. You know how a sweater unravels when you pick the right thread. That was Karen's little empire. Then the money trail peeked out. The HOA reserve fund looked healthy on paper, but the vendor list was a shell game, with one name popping up again and again, a management services outfit Karen controlled through a relative. Payments went there for jobs no one remembered seeing done. Fresh paint that never dried because it never existed. Landscaping that left the grass longer than before. It looked, in my opinion, like siphoning. Stella raised an eyebrow. Said, "Keep collecting." Karen escalated. She called my mortgage company. Somehow, her brother-in-law worked there and told them I was a risk. She filed a police report claiming I'd threatened her, which the responding officer didn't buy the minute he watched my footage and saw me on my porch with a coffee while Karen jabbed her finger toward a non-existent violation. She wrote anonymous letters to the county about environmental hazards. And one night, my camera caught someone dumping a bag of rotting fish near my septic field. Next morning, the county guy arrived after an anonymous complaint. He took one sniff, looked at me, then at the camera mounted under the eaves, and said, "Mind if I see last night's recordings?" The video showed a figure in pink garden gloves hustling away. The gloves were Karen's signature, like a cartoon calling card. The neighbors began to gather in my kitchen in the evenings. We called ourselves the Coffee Club. Because what else do you do while your blood pressure spools up but pour another cup? People shared paperwork. We compared wording. Seals. The small fonts nobody reads. Patterns jumped out. Same phrases. Same threats. Same late-night prowling. I mean, maybe I'm old-fashioned, but when a community turns into a scavenger hunt for fines, you've lost the plot. A local reporter from Channel 7 showed up after Karen fed them a story about a dangerous veteran terrorizing the neighborhood. I opened the door and said, "Come see." We laid out the documents. We queued up footage of Karen measuring a flagpole and declaring it a menace. The piece aired that night, not as a smear, but as a question when rules go rotten. What then? The phone at the station rang with calls from other towns. People had stories. Folks always do. They just need a safe ear. Stella reached out to the state. A deputy in the Attorney General's office asked for a meeting. I straightened the living room, brewed a fresh pot, and placed my grandfather's deed on the table like a talisman. The deed, yellowed at the edges, showed property lines that would later matter more than I knew. The morning the Attorney General Santos stepped into my cabin, the door burst open behind them so hard it rattled the mugs. Karen stormed in with a clipboard like a shield, barking about immediate compliance. She took 3 steps, saw the badge on Santos's belt, and went paler than unpainted drywall. Santos didn't raise their voice. "Ma'am," they said evenly, "you just entered a private residence without permission. Please wait outside." Karen's mouth opened and closed like a trout. She backed out onto the porch, left heel snagging on the threshold. We sat. We talked. I showed the log. Santos listened the way good prosecutors listen, quiet, focused, as if putting puzzle pieces into a picture only they could see. We watched the video of the pink-gloved figure hauling fish. We scrolled through bank statements Stella had subpoenaed, lines of payments to that same management shell. We examined the HOA formation packet with the too tidy signature. "It's not proof alone," Santos said, "but it's a path. Keep the originals safe." By then, the coffee club had turned into a community meeting. Martha spoke about her rosebed in a voice that made the room go still. Tom described sitting in his truck late at night just so Karen would stop circling his driveway. A young dad told how his twins cried after their chalk drawings earned the family a formal notice that used the word vandalism. It wasn't just rules. It was dignity. The next HOA meeting should have been a snooze budget lines, paint tones, but it wasn't. Dale, the tire shop guy who served as treasurer, blurted something about the paperwork being sketchy from day one and then looked like he wished the floor would open up. Karen glared. But the room had shifted. People who'd nodded politely for years were now staring at their own copies of documents and seeing, finally, what had been in plain sight. Karen responded, the only way she knew how: more patrols, more notices, more knocking at odd hours. She parked across from my place and watched like a hawk. She left laminated flyers on doors that said, "Compliance is community," which made my teeth hurt. She told anyone who'd listen that I was unstable. At Murphy's Diner, she went table to table, whispering that I was dangerous. Folks had known me since I was knee-high. They nodded and let her pass. Then they came to me, shaking their heads. I'm not proud of this, but there were nights I sat on the dock and felt the pure, stupid urge to go pound on Karen's door and yell until I ran out of air. I didn't. Instead, I pressed play on the little voice recorder I kept in my pocket and said the date and the urge out loud. Do not act on anger. I told myself, because someone had to. The day I found my grandfather's trunk changed everything. It was tucked under the bed I'd slept in as a kid, the lid stiff with age. Inside medals, a stack of letters bound with a shoelace, and a rolled parchment, the original deed from the early 1960s. The map scratched by a surveyor's pen showed our property line stretching farther than the HOA maps claimed, right under a rose garden and a gazebo that Karen liked to show off during neighborhood tours. I sat there with the map spread across the quilt and let out a long, slow breath that felt like both relief and a storm warning. We added that deed to the stack for Santos. We color-tabbed it like a rainbow. We made copies. Then copies of copies. Because paper disappears in ugly fights, and I wasn't gonna let that happen. A week later, the local news followed up. The story had legs. People from neighboring towns emailed, saying their own HOAs had gone from helpful to hungry. A retired bookkeeper offered to audit our association's books for free. She brought pastries and a calculator older than my truck. She frowned at the ledgers, then hummed a small, surprise note. The sound a mechanic makes when they see a bolt that never should have loosened. Either I forgot how to count, she said, or funds are missing. Karen started making bigger mistakes. She bribed a teenager. This came out later to dump motor oil by my boat slip. She called the county again. The inspector took one look at the oily sheen. Then at my camera, always record, and said, "Let's just see last night." The screen showed a lanky kid hustling in, dumping a jug, and zipping away in a hoodie from Karen's son's failed restaurant. The inspector rubbed his forehead like the headache had arrived early. Stella filed our counterclaim formation defects. Harassment. Misuse of funds. It was, in lawyer speak, a stack. Court papers landed like a thud on Karen's porch. She posted on the community board that we were unhinged and destructive. Folks read it, then came by my place to ask what was true. I poured coffee and laid out the receipts. People aren't dumb. They just need the whole table, not just the plate you push at them. One soft evening, Tom knocked and asked if we could pray. We stood on the deck under a sky the color of bruised plums and asked for patience, for clear minds, for justice. I'm not here to preach, but it steadied me. When the storm hits, the smallest rituals keep you from drifting. Karen barged into my yard again the next morning. Tape measure snapping like a snake. Immediate compliance. She said, "Your dock exceeds permitted length." I pointed at the deed. "Your measurements start on my land." She scoffed, tore the notice from her pad, and slapped it against my chest. The pink glove squeaked on my jacket like a cartoon sound effect. 30 days. She hissed. Or else. Or else, what I asked. And I said it calm. She blinked, like she hadn't prepared for calm. Bullies rarely do. We were past the point of pretending this was about paint or fences. This was power. Karen craved it. The board enabled it. And the rules once meant to keep things tidy had become a cudgel. The question wasn't whether my dock leaned. It was whether rules serve people or people serve rules. The coffee club had an answer. Santos scheduled a formal sit-down at my cabin. I set out cookies like my grandmother taught me. 'Cause hospitality ain't weakness. When the knock came, I opened the door to Santos. 2 investigators with legal pads. And a breeze that smelled like pine. We were 6 minutes into the meeting when the door whacked wide and Karen stormed in again. Voice already climbing a ladder of outrage. Immediate she started. Then froze when she saw Santos's badge. "Ma'am," Santos said, steady as a level, "you have just entered a private home without consent." They gestured to the porch. "Please wait outside." Karen tried to bluster something about authority, community, and urgent violations, but the words fizzled. She stepped back. One hand still clamped around her clipboard like a life preserver. Inside, we got to work. I played the clips, the pink gloves, the late-night prowls, the teenager with the oil jug, the surveyor admitting, on a scratchy voice memo, that he'd been leaned on to be creative. Stella spread the ledgers on the dining table and traced payment paths with a yellow pencil. The Attorney General's team took notes, asked clean questions, and didn't pretend this was solved in an hour. "We'll need time," Santos said. I nodded. Patience had become my side hustle. That afternoon, Martha showed up with a folder of photographs of her rose bed, each bloom labeled in her shaky handwriting. 40 years, she said softly. I planted them after Richard came home. Karen said they blocked the view. She pressed her lips together. There's a difference between order and cruelty. The room felt crowded with the ghosts of things pruned too short. Tom brought his own story. She'd park across from my place, he said, knuckles white around a styrofoam cup. Just sit and stare for an hour. Felt like a test I couldn't pass. He shrugged. A big man trying to take up less space. I kept telling myself to be calm. But it ain't easy. The young couple came with crayons and a stack of paper. Their twins drew hearts and boats, while their mom spoke about notices stamped with the word vandalism because of chalk. They cried, she said. They didn't understand how a rainbow could be wrong. There's a kind of quiet that only descends when a room realizes it has the same story told 10 different ways. Santos heard it. Document everything, they said. We'll do our part. Karen did not wait for the process. She went on offense. She wrote to the mortgage company again, embellishing her story. She called the police twice more. She clipped a photo of me carrying firewood and wrote hazard. She posted a glossy flyer with the words, "Compliance is community," over a stock photo of a smiling family that looked nothing like anyone who lived here. She updated the HOA website to include a new rule about unsightly marine structures, which was funny. I mean, considering the only marine structure here was my dock. I kept working my plan. Security cameras, logs, screenshots. I printed everything, because paper has a way of waiting patiently for truth. The coffee club built a shared binder with tabs labeled by name. We became, in the kindest way, stubborn. One evening, the surveyor, hat in hand, came by to apologize. She only paid me half, he said. When I balked, she threatened to ruin me. He looked ashamed. I'm willing to testify. I won't lie for her again. People fall into bad choices for all kinds of reasons. The only way out is honesty with a side of courage. We offered him both. The treasurer, Dale, teetered at the edge of doing the right thing. He showed up carrying a shoebox of receipts that smelled like motor oil. Something's off, he admitted. I don't want to go down with her. He stared at the floor. I thought the little stuff didn't matter. Then it got big. I ain't a saint. But I didn't gloat. I set out another chair. Stella filed motions. The court date landed on a calendar that suddenly felt crowded. Karen posted that we were wasting everyone's time and money. If you're so sure, I told the board at the next meeting. Open the books in full. The room hummed. People who'd stayed neutral started to lean. The second news piece aired. This time, focused on the community's voices. Viewers wrote in. A retired state investigator phoned to say the ledgers looked familiar in all the wrong ways. He volunteered to meet with Santos's team. Karen began to lose control in small, telling ways. She misused words in notices. Called a hydrant a hydrogen. Wrote immediate complaints in bold. Then sent a second email correcting herself. Petty. Sure. But bullies hate the mirror. On a damp Tuesday, a box arrived at my door with no return address. Inside were printed emails between Karen and a contractor. In them, she told him to find something or make it up, and promised a bonus if a violation stuck. The sender was anonymous. but the headers looked real. Stella verified what she could. If these check out, she said, they're dynamite. We sent copies to Santos and kept the originals locked in a fireproof bag under the floorboard my granddad had designed to lift up with a butter knife. The old man had known a thing or two about storms. The hearing felt like walking into a gym where the bleachers held your history. Folks from the lake came in their Sunday best, as if neat collars could steady nerves. Karen arrived in a suit the color of wet cement. Her clipboard traded for a leather portfolio. She smiled at people she'd find and waved as if nothing had ever cut. Some waved back out of habit. Habit is hard to break. The judge was patient and blunt. Stella spoke plainly. No fireworks. She laid out formation defects, payments to a shell, patterns of harassment. She didn't call Karen a thief. She let the documents whisper it themselves. Karen's lawyer objected, deflected, blamed rogue volunteers. I kept my face still, staring at a knot in the wood table as if it could anchor me. When Stella introduced the video of the pink gloves and the fish, there was a hush so deep the air sounded like cloth. Karen stared straight ahead. Her lawyer tried to say the figure wasn't identifiable. Stella paused the frame where the bracelet flashed. The very bracelet Karen wore in court. Even then, we treated it as allegations supported by footage. Because the truth respects process. The judge didn't rule that day. They rarely do on knots like this. But the court ordered a deeper look, appointed a neutral to review the books, and warned that further harassment would weigh heavily. Karen walked out tight-jawed. On the steps, she told a reporter, "We were destroying the community." The reporter raised an eyebrow like, "Ma'am, the tape measure did that. That night I sat on the dock and watched the lake go from slate to ink." A loon called across the water. That long, eerie note that sounds like a question you can't answer. I wanted quiet. What I got was resolve. I ain't gonna lie. I whispered to the dark. I'm tired. But tired ain't quitting. The coffee club grew. People brought pie. Someone set up a donation coffee can at the hardware store with a hand-lettered sign that said, "Neighbors help neighbors." The can filled fast. Pride is good. Community is better. The retired bookkeeper's audit, paired with the neutral's initial findings, suggested funds had, in their words, migrated in ways that favored Karen's orbit. Payments for landscaping to a company that never mowed. Consulting fees that bought no advice anyone could recall. It looked, to our eyes, like siphoning dressed in a church hat. Again. Opinion until it wasn't. Karen tried a new tactic charm. She knocked with a Tupperware of cookies and a grin that showed extra teeth. Misunderstandings. She cooed. We want to make this right. She dangled the idea of forgiving some fines if the community would press his reparations. You know. Be gracious. Martha listened, then closed her door with a gentle click that somehow felt like a thunderclap. A week later, Santos called. We're coming by, they said. We have updates. I set out fresh mugs and a plate of Martha's blueberry muffins that tasted like a soft childhood. When the team arrived, they were all business with an undercurrent I recognized: momentum. They'd traced payments. They'd interviewed contractors. They had, in measured terms, concerns. Keep your logs, Santos said. This is moving. Karen must have smelled the shift. She showed up at my place again. What is it with the dramatic entrances, and tried to serve me with a fresh stack of fines. Some so absurd, they read like parody. Unapproved bird activity. One notice said, because my feeder drew. Well, birds. She accused a wind chime of excessive decibels. She wrote the phrase unsanctioned sunset viewing in the margin and circled it twice like a teacher grading sin. I laughed. Couldn't help it. She flushed. You will comply, she insisted. Or you will regret it, ma'am, I said. That's not how community works. She stomped to the curb and, in a move so strange it felt staged, took photos of my mailbox from 12 different angles. My mailbox is red. That is all. Neighbors started filming their own encounters and sharing them with Stella. Patterns don't lie. They repeat themselves until even folks who didn't want to pick a side see the picture. The morning everything snapped into place was quieter than you'd expect. Santos arrived at my cabin for a scheduled meeting. We'd barely sat when the door blew open again. Karen rushed in. Not a knock to be found. This time, she launched into a speech about imminent hazards and community liability. Santos stood and spoke in a tone that could calm a stampede. Ma'am, they said, you have just committed multiple offenses in front of the chief law enforcement officer of this state. Karen blinked. Please wait outside, Santos said. We will speak with you shortly. Karen stepped back, color draining like rinse water. She left the door wide, as if air might change the facts. Inside, Santos turned to me. We're prepared to act, they said. They did not list details. Their eyes had that narrowed focus of someone counting the last inches of a finish line. We went through the materials one last time. The deed overlay showed our boundary carving under Karen's prized rose garden and gazebo, which meant, subject to proper legal adjudication, that her showpiece improvements sat on my land. The ledger lines formed a braid of payments to the shell. The video showed gloves, late-night prowls, and, in one almost absurd clip, Karen whisper coaching a contractor to find something or make it up. Allegations. Yes, but stacked like cordwood, ready for winter. Santos nodded and stepped onto the porch. I heard their voice, low but firm, explaining rights and processes. I heard Karen sputter. Then I heard quiet. The kind that lands when someone realizes the story they've been telling is about to meet a different author. Within days. State investigators. Later. Federal agents moved. Subpoenas. Interviews. A polite knock that carried the weight of consequence. I ain't cheering for anyone's downfall. But I won't apologize for relief when a long wrong finally meets a stop sign. Karen and the treasurer were taken in for questioning at dawn one chilly morning. Her famous clipboard lay on the driveway like a crown knocked askew. The news van idled half a block away, antenna up. The reporter's scarf tossing in the wind like a flag that didn't know which way to fly. The board convened an emergency meeting and, in a miracle of speed, voted to suspend enforcement while the investigation proceeded. People exhaled so hard you could hear it. Birds sounded louder. It's funny how quickly normal can return when fear takes a lunch break. Weeks later, the court dissolved the association pending reformation under neutral oversight. Restitution orders started to spool out for those who'd been squeezed dry by years of petty tyranny. Martha replanted. Tom slept through the night. The twins drew chalk rainbows so big you could see them from the lake road. As for my place, the deed lines held. Karen's gazebo, after lawyers and surveyors did their careful dance, came down. We salvaged the wood and built a long picnic table that could seat half the neighborhood. Martha christened it with a pie. Tom carved a small inscription on the underside where only the curious would find it. Community is not compliance. It's care. I started a small veterans retreat at the cabin. Nothing fancy, kayaks patched with love, a grill that smoked like a friendly campfire, and a porch that welcomed the weight of quiet conversation. Martha keeps the booking notebook in her tidy cursive. Tom takes folks out at dawn to fish. The lake glass calm under a sky that feels like mercy. The coffee can fund rests by the door. Not because we need it, but because it reminds us who we are when we choose each other. People ask sometimes if I hate Karen. I don't. I won't give her that rent-free space. I think about how power can warp a person who stops listening. I think about how rules are fine until they become a religion with fines as sacraments. And I think sorry. I know that one bully gave a whole neighborhood the gift of finding its spine. If you're listening to this and thinking about your own HOA battle, here's what I learned. Neighbor to neighbor. Document everything. Paper is patient and cameras don't get flustered. Build a small circle that shares truth without drama. Be calm even when your bones want to shout. And this matters, remember that dignity ain't a gift from a board, it's your birthright. Every evening now, I sit on the rebuilt dock with a mug that tastes like hope. The water holds the last light, the way a memory holds a laugh. Sometimes I swear I hear my granddad clearing his throat behind me, approving the way you do with a gruff little nod. The wind lifts. The cedar sighs. And the house, our house, settles deeper into the earth, like it finally trusts it can stay. The old rose garden. We turned the bed into a community compost bin. Black gold, feeding Martha's new memorial blooms. Every peel and coffee ground is a vote for tomorrow. No clipboards required. So tell me, what would you do if your HOA president kicked in your door and tried to make your life her empire? Would you pay and pray it goes away? Or would you, Everett, stand your ground and make a file so thick it could stop a truck? Anyone else had a HOA do this to you? Drop your story below. Somebody out there needs your courage tonight. And hey, if you believe bullies shrink under daylight, you might want to stick around. Next time I'll talk about the small-town mayor who tried to shut down a veteran's food cart, and what happened when he picked the wrong soldier to mess with. But for now, we rest. We heal. We look out for each other. That's a community worth defending.